Every year, on December 24th, Raymond Mercer told the same story. He told it to detectives, to journalists, to anyone who would listen. He told it so many times and so consistently that for 16 days almost everyone believed him. Almost. He said his wife had left. That's all. That she had been upset, that they'd argued as couples do at Christmas, about nothing important, and that she had grabbed her coat, walked out the front door and driven away. He said he had assumed she needed space. He said he had gone to bed. He said that when he woke up on Christmas morning, her side of the bed was empty. He said he was worried but not alarmed. He said he made coffee. He said he sat by the window. He said he waited. He said a lot of things. What Raymond Mercer did not say, what he had calculated with cold and extraordinary precision, would never be discovered, was that his wife Diane had not walked out that door. That she had not driven away. That she had not needed space. Diane Mercer had died in her own home on Christmas Eve, with her husband's hands around her throat. And then Raymond had carried her body to the lake. Ashford Lake is the kind of town you move to when you've made it. Not spectacularly, not hedge fund made it, but solidly, reliably, two incomes in a Lakeview made it. It sits in Hartford County, Connecticut, with 9,000 residents, a main street that still has an independent bookshop, and the kind of frozen lake that families photograph on winter mornings because it genuinely looks like a Christmas card. Raymond and Diane Mercer had moved there in 2007, 6 years before the night that would end everything. Raymond was a project manager at an engineering firm in Hartford. Diane was a primary school teacher, 3rd grade, beloved by all accounts, to a degree that primary school teachers rarely are. She was the kind of teacher whose former students came back years later to say hello. She kept every card they ever sent her. The couple. They had been married for 11 years. They had met at the University of Connecticut in the mid-90s, Raymond studying civil engineering, Diane studying education. By every visible measure they were a good match. They attended neighborhood barbecues. They hosted a Christmas party every year. The last one in 2012 had drawn nearly 40 guests. They were on the HOA committee. They recycled diligently. They seemed, to everyone around them, perfectly fine. Diane's colleagues at Ashford Lake Elementary School described her as warm, patient, endlessly creative. She made her own classroom decorations. She remembered every student's birthday. She cried at the end of every school year when her class moved on. Raymond was described by colleagues and neighbors in somewhat different terms. Professional. Capable. A little guarded. Someone you'd call reliable but not someone you'd call a friend. A man who was easier to respect than to know. The marriage behind the Christmas card. But here is what the neighbors didn't see. What the HOA didn't see. What the 40 Christmas party guests in 2012 absolutely did not see. Diane Mercer had confided in two people. Her older sister, Carol Whitmore, and her closest friend at school, a woman named Patricia Gaines, that her marriage had been in serious difficulty for at least 3 years before her death. She described Raymond as controlling. Not violently, at least not at first, but in ways that were consistent, methodical, and deeply wearing. He monitored her phone. He questioned her about where she had been. He made comments about how she dressed, how she spent her free periods at school, who she spoke to at social events and for how long. She had stopped going to the gym because he had made enough comments about the male trainers there that going stopped feeling worth the argument. Carol Whitmore would later testify that in the summer of 2013, 6 months before Christmas Eve, Diane had called her late at night, crying, whispering so Raymond wouldn't hear, and said she was thinking about leaving. Diane did not leave in the summer of 2013. She stayed. She went back to school in September. She planned Christmas. She bought gifts for her students. She bought a new tree stand because the old one had cracked. She was trying to hold it together. To get through the holidays. To find the right moment. She ran out of time. Raymond Mercer called the Ashford Lake Police Department at 9:14 a.m. on December 26th, 2 days after Christmas Eve. Not the 25th. Not the 24th. The 26th. He reported his wife missing. He told the dispatcher that Diane had left the house on the evening of December 24th, following an argument. He said the argument had been about plans for Christmas Day, whether to visit his family or hers. He said things had been said that he regretted. He said she had left in her car, a silver Honda Accord. He said he had expected her to return. He said he had waited all of Christmas Day. He said he was very worried. The first interview. Detective Sergeant Karen Holt of the Ashford Lake PD was assigned to take Raymond's statement. She would later describe their first meeting in detail in court and in subsequent press interviews. Raymond met her at the door of his home. He was dressed neatly, pressed trousers, a sweater. The house was immaculate. Christmas decorations were up. Unwrapped gifts were still sitting under the tree untouched. A half-eaten plate of food was on the kitchen counter. Raymond's Christmas dinner, he explained, that he hadn't been able to finish because he was too worried about Diane. Detective Holt noted in her initial report that the scene presented as entirely consistent with Raymond's account. A man waiting alone in a house full of Christmas. She wrote that he was cooperative and distressed. She did not use the word concerned. She wrote distressed. She also noted something else. She wrote it at the bottom of her report, almost as an afterthought, the kind of observation that feels minor at the time and becomes enormous later. She wrote, "The kitchen smelled strongly of bleach." 16 days of looking. The investigation that followed Raymond's report was, initially, a missing persons case. Diane's silver Honda Accord was located within 24 hours, parked at the Ashford Lake commuter rail station, 3 miles from the Mercer home. This initially seemed significant. It suggested she had traveled somewhere. It suggested she had a plan. But there was no train ticket purchased in Diane's name. No credit card activity. No ATM withdrawals. No phone calls. No texts. Her mobile phone pinged a tower near the Mercer home at 7:43 p.m. on December 24th, and then nothing. Total silence. Her colleagues at the school were contacted. Her friends. Her sister Carol. All of them expressed immediate, serious alarm. Not the alarm of people who thought Diane might have run away, but the alarm of people who knew she wouldn't. Carol Whitmore flew in from Boston the day she heard. She told Detective Holt, clearly and without hesitation, she didn't leave. Something happened to her. But Raymond Mercer sat in his immaculate house, maintained his calm account, cooperated with every request, provided a written timeline, and twice asked, in a quiet, strained voice, whether anyone had checked the hospitals. For 16 days he held the center of the story. Ashford Lake freezes every winter reliably by mid-December. The ice typically reaches 4 to 6 inches thick by Christmas, solid enough to walk on, popular with ice fishermen and families in the weeks after the holiday. Local authorities post safety signs. The ice is measured and monitored. It is not, under normal circumstances, a place where anyone expects to find a body. On the morning of January 9, 2014, 16 days after Diane Mercer had last been seen, the temperature climbed 7 degrees overnight. It was still well below freezing. But that 7-degree rise was enough. A section of ice near the western bank of Ashford Lake, approximately 80 meters from a small wooden dock that Raymond Mercer had built himself in 2010, developed a crack. A retired teacher named Harold Vance was walking his dog along the lake path that morning when the dog stopped and began to bark at the cracked ice. Harold called the dog back. But the dog kept barking. Harold Vance looked at the crack. And beneath the ice in the dark water, he saw something. He called the police from his cell phone. His hands were shaking so badly that he misdialed twice. The recovery. Connecticut State Police divers recovered the body of Diane Claire Mercer from Ashford Lake at 1:47 p.m. on January 9, 2014. She had been submerged in approximately 12 feet of water, weighted with a concrete block, the kind used in garden borders, tied to her ankles with electrical cable. The medical examiner, Dr. Constance Wu, would later determine that Diane had been manually strangled, that is, with bare hands, and that death had occurred on or around December 24th. She had been placed in the water within a short time of her death. The water temperature had preserved the body with unusual clarity. The bruising around Diane's neck was, in Dr. Wu's clinical terms, fully consistent with sustained manual strangulation by an adult of significant upper body strength. Dr. Wu also noted that Diane had sustained a blunt force injury to the back of her skull, not fatal, but indicative of a fall or impact that had likely rendered her briefly unconscious prior to the strangulation. Someone had hit her first, then waited, then killed her. The moment Diane Mercer's body was recovered from Ashford Lake, the investigation changed completely. It became a homicide. Raymond Mercer became a suspect. He was told of his wife's discovery by Detective Holt in person at his home. She watched his face carefully as she gave him the news. She would describe his reaction later as controlled. He went very still. He pressed his lips together. He sat down. He did not cry. He said, "Oh God." He said it twice. Then he asked quietly how she had been found. Holt told him she couldn't share those details yet. Raymond nodded. He said he understood. He asked if he needed a lawyer. In 16 years as a detective, Holt later said, that was the first time she had ever heard a grieving spouse ask that particular question at that particular moment. Raymond Mercer was formally interviewed as a suspect on January 10, 2014, one day after his wife's body was recovered. He arrived with a lawyer, a Hartford-based defense attorney named Gerald Strauss, whom it emerged he had retained 3 days before Diane's body was found. That detail, the preemptive lawyer, was the first substantial crack in his account. It suggested that Raymond Mercer had known, or had reason to believe, that the investigation was moving toward him. And it raised an obvious question. If you are an innocent man waiting for news about your missing wife, why do you hire a lawyer a week into the search? Strauss was experienced and careful. Raymond, with his counsel's guidance, answered some questions, declined others, and maintained, throughout a 3-hour interview, that he had told the complete truth from the beginning. Diane had left. They had argued. He had gone to bed. He did not know what had happened after she drove away. It was a good story. It had been, for 16 days, a very good story. But now there was a body. And bodies tell their own stories. The evidence begins to speak. The forensic investigation of the Mercer home, conducted under a warrant issued January 10th, took 4 days. What it produced was a mosaic of evidence that, piece by piece, dismantled Raymond's account. First, luminol testing in the kitchen revealed traces of blood on the tile floor, the lower cabinet doors, and the underside of the kitchen island countertop. The bleach that Detective Holt had smelled on her first visit had done significant damage, but it had not done enough. Second, fibers matching the carpet from the master bedroom were found on the exterior of the back door's threshold, consistent with something heavy being dragged across the floor and out through that door toward the garden and the lake beyond. Third, a concrete block was missing from a stack Raymond kept in the garden shed, a stack he had used for a border wall project in 2011. He had 6 blocks in the photograph he had posted on a neighborhood DIY forum at the time. When investigators counted them, there were 5. One was at the bottom of Ashford Lake, tied to his wife's ankles. Fourth, and most critically, Raymond's cell phone records showed that he had called his wife's mobile number 3 times on the evening of December 24th, between 8:15 p.m. and 9:02 p.m. Diane's phone, which had last pinged near their home at 7:43 p.m., did not receive any of those calls. It was off, or it was at the bottom of a lake. But here is the detail that prosecutors would later call the most devastating of all. Raymond had purchased, on December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve, 2 spools of heavy-gauge electrical cable from a hardware store in Hartford. 30 meters total. He had paid cash. He had purchased the cable the day before he said he hadn't known anything was going to happen. Raymond Mercer had not acted in a moment of passion. He had planned. He had shopped. He had prepared. Christmas Eve was not the night his marriage broke. It was the night he had chosen in advance for it to end. Carol Whitmore was 43 years old when her sister was murdered. She was a university administrator in Boston, steady and precise, a woman who, by her own description, did not often lose composure. She lost it entirely when the police called to say they had recovered a body from Ashford Lake. But she gathered herself, because there was work to do. And because Carol Whitmore had known from the moment her sister went missing who had done it. She had known because Diane had told her things. Carefully, over years, in phone calls and visits and text messages that she now understood with terrible new clarity. She had known because she had watched her sister slowly disappear inside a marriage to a man who controlled everything around him, and who had made it clear in his cold and indirect way that the worst possible thing Diane could do was leave. The conversation that haunted everything. In the summer of 2013, Diane had told Carol that Raymond had said something to her during an argument that had frightened her badly. She had tried to minimize it, to contextualize it as heated words said in anger. Carol had pressed her on it. Diane said that during a fight about her wanting to visit a friend alone, a female colleague from work, Raymond had stood very still, looked at her and said quietly, "You don't want to find out what happens if you leave me, Diane. You really don't." He had said it once. He had not raised his voice. He had not repeated it. He had walked out of the room and made dinner. Diane's last days. In the final weeks of November 2013, according to text messages later recovered from Diane's phone records and from Carol's own phone, Diane had been making quiet preparations. She had spoken to a solicitor, a family law specialist in Hartford, by phone in mid-November. She had not visited in person. She had not left a paper trail. But she had called. The solicitor's office confirmed the call when approached by investigators. She had also transferred a small amount of money, $400, from a joint account into a personal savings account she had opened in her name only in October. Raymond did not know about the savings account. Or investigators would later wonder, perhaps he did. Her friend Patricia Gaines told investigators that Diane had said, at a coffee meeting in the first week of December, that she was going to tell Raymond after Christmas that she was leaving. She had been specific about the timing. She said she didn't want to ruin the holiday for the sake of the inevitable fallout. She said she was going to get through Christmas and then tell him. It is possible that Raymond knew this. It is possible that he had seen the bank statement or noticed the solicitor's number in her call history, or simply read, in the way that controlling people read the people they control, the quiet withdrawal that preceded her decision. It is possible that Raymond Mercer had decided, with that advance cable purchase on December 23rd, that Diane was never going to get the chance to tell him anything. Raymond Mercer was a project manager. His professional life was built on planning, sequencing, problem-solving, and the removal of variables. He brought that skill set to the murder of his wife. And for 16 days it worked. But here is the thing about trying to plan a perfect crime. Every plan has a planner. And planners, even meticulous ones, are human. They miss things. They misjudge variables. They overestimate their own control over a universe that refuses to be managed. Raymond Mercer made 6 mistakes. Each one alone might not have been enough. Together, they built a wall around him that no lawyer and no amount of composure could break through. Mistake 1, the hardware store. He paid cash for the electrical cable. That was smart. What wasn't smart was using a hardware store in Hartford, 28 miles from Ashford Lake, presumably to avoid being recognized. But Hartford had CCTV. The store had CCTV. And Raymond was a tall man with distinctive posture and a very particular way of moving, slightly forward-leaning, deliberate, that investigators matched to the footage within 48 hours of obtaining the warrant. Mistake 2, the bleach. He cleaned the kitchen. Thoroughly. With industrial-strength bleach. But he cleaned it on December 24th, immediately, before his wife was even officially missing. No one knew there had been an incident. No one had told him to clean anything. The bleach was not the action of a man whose wife had just walked out the door after an argument. It was the action of a man who had just committed a crime in his kitchen. Mistake 3, the phone calls. He called Diane's phone 3 times that evening. To anyone watching, to any investigating officer reading cell records, this looked like a worried husband trying to reach his missing wife. But the timing was wrong. He called at 8:15, 8:40, and 9:02 p.m. Diane's phone had gone dark at 7:43 p.m. He was calling a phone he had already disposed of. He was constructing a record of concern for a phone he knew would never ring. Mistake 4, the car. He drove Diane's Honda Accord to the commuter rail station himself, to create the impression she had traveled somewhere. He then walked home, 3 miles in December at night. He was seen by one witness, a neighbor walking a dog who didn't think anything of it at the time. Didn't think of it until investigators knocked on every door within half a mile of the route and asked, systematically, if anyone had seen anything unusual on December 24th. Mistake 5. The lawyer. Retaining legal counsel before his wife's body was found. Gerald Strauss was a fine attorney, but the optics of his involvement, 3 days before the discovery, were catastrophic. It implied foreknowledge. It implied that Raymond knew the case was moving toward him. It implied, above all, that Raymond Mercer knew his wife was not coming home. Mistake 6. The dock. He put her in the lake. His own lake. At his own dock. In a community where people walked the lake path every morning. In a winter that, unpredictably, unusually, produced a brief temperature rise in early January that cracked exactly the section of ice above where he had placed her. He had gambled on a hard winter. January 9th called the bet. Raymond Thomas Mercer was charged with murder in the first degree on February 3, 2014, 6 weeks after his wife's body was recovered. He was held without bail. The prosecuting attorney was Hartford County's Assistant District Attorney, Michelle Park, a former public defender who had turned to prosecution and never looked back. The trial began on September 8, 2014, and ran for 22 days. It drew national media attention, partly because of the Christmas Eve setting, partly because of the lake, and partly because Raymond Mercer, in the months of his incarceration, had lost none of his composure. He sat at the defense table every day in a dark suit, attentive and still, and looked to every photograph taken of him, like a man at a business meeting rather than a man on trial for the murder of his wife. The prosecution's case. Ada Park built her case methodically, the same quality prosecutors would note with a certain dark symmetry that Raymond had brought to his crime. She laid the forensic evidence first. The luminol results, the cable, the missing concrete block, the hardware store CCTV footage, the phone records. Each piece presented clearly, linked explicitly, explained in terms a jury of 12 could follow without forensic expertise. Then she brought in the people who had known Diane. Carol Whitmore, Patricia Gaines, 3 colleagues from the school. A former neighbor who had once seen Raymond grab Diane's arm in a driveway and had never forgotten it. They built a portrait of a woman trying to leave a dangerous man, and the danger she had not been able to escape in time. And then she called Dr. Constance Wu. The medical examiner's testimony was clinically precise and utterly devastating. The nature of the injuries, the timeline they established, the fact that the blunt force injury to Diane's skull preceded the strangulation, the fact that someone had taken their time. The defense. Gerald Strauss's defense rested on 3 pillars. First, the forensic evidence was circumstantial. No DNA, no eyewitness to the act itself, no murder weapon. The hands could not be presented as evidence. Second, the cable and concrete block, while suggestive, could not be definitively linked to Raymond. The receipt showed a cash purchase on a general store CCTV. The defense argued the quality was insufficient for positive identification. Third, Raymond's behavior following Diane's disappearance, while consistent with guilt, was equally consistent with profound shock. Strauss did not put Raymond on the stand. A calculated decision, one that removed the possibility of cross-examination but also removed Raymond's voice from the jury's consideration at a crucial moment. It was a competent defense. Against the weight of the prosecution's case, it was not enough. The verdict. The jury of 8 women and 4 men deliberated for 2 days. On September 30, 2014, they returned. Raymond Mercer stood as the verdict was read. Guilty. Of murder in the first degree. He did not react. Not a muscle moved in his face. Not a breath changed. Carol Whitmore, seated behind the prosecution, pressed both hands to her mouth and wept without sound. Patricia Gaines, Diane's friend from school, later said that in the moment the verdict was read, she thought of Diane saying she just needed a little more time. She said she had to leave the courtroom. Raymond Thomas Mercer was sentenced on November 12, 2014 to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Connecticut had abolished the death penalty in 2012. He was 43 years old at sentencing. He will die in prison. At his sentencing, Ada Park read victim impact statements submitted by Carol Whitmore, Patricia Gaines, and 12 of Diane's former students. Children who were now teenagers and who had been told, age appropriately, what had happened to the teacher who had remembered every one of their birthdays. Raymond Mercer offered no statement at sentencing. He said nothing. He maintained, through every moment of every legal proceeding from arrest to sentence, the same controlled, impenetrable stillness that had kept him safe for 16 days and could not save him for 16 more. The people who remained. Detective Sergeant Karen Holt received a commendation for her work on the Mercer case. She continued with Ashford Lake PD for another 4 years before taking a senior position with the Connecticut State Police Major Crimes Unit. She has given a number of interviews about the case over the years. She is consistent on one point: the bleach. The smell of bleach on that first morning. She has said repeatedly that in missing persons and homicide investigation, the domestic details, the small domestic details, are where cases are made. Carol Whitmore returned to Boston after the sentencing. She established a small fund in Diane's name that provides emergency financial support for women in Hartford County who are trying to leave abusive relationships, specifically for costs like rental deposits and legal consultation fees. The kind of costs that had kept Diane accumulating that $400 quietly in an account Raymond didn't know about. Patricia Gaines still teaches at Ashford Lake Elementary School. She has said, a photograph of Diane on her desk. Every year, at the end of the school year when her class moves on, she thinks about what Diane said, that she cried every time they left. She says she tries to feel the same way. Harold Vance, the retired teacher whose dog wouldn't stop barking at a crack in the ice, was awarded a citizen's commendation by the Ashford Lake PD. He declined to give interviews. He stopped walking that particular section of the lake path. He chose a different route. A note on coercive control. In the years since Raymond Mercer's conviction, the case has been studied in the context of coercive control, the pattern of behavior now recognized as a criminal offense in several jurisdictions, in which one partner systematically controls, isolates, and dominates another. Raymond Mercer was never charged with coercive control. It was not on the statute books in Connecticut in 2013 in those terms. He was charged with and convicted of what coercive control leads to when the victim tries to escape. Researchers who have studied the case note that Diane Mercer displayed, in the months before her death, what is now recognized as a specific pattern of behavior among domestic abuse victims planning to leave. The quiet financial preparation, the legal consultation, the conversations with trusted friends, the setting of a future date. They call this pattern the escape window. Research shows that this window, the period in which a victim is planning to leave, is the most dangerous period of all. The moment at which a controlling partner senses loss of control is statistically the most likely moment for violence to escalate. Diane Mercer was in her escape window. Raymond Mercer knew it. And he closed the window before she could climb through it. Diane Claire Mercer was 38 years old. She had been a teacher for 12 years. She had saved cards from her students going back to her very first class. She had a laugh, her sister said, that made people in adjacent rooms want to know what was funny. She wanted to leave a man who frightened her. She was $400 and one Christmas and a little more time away from doing it. She deserved that time. She deserved every day she was denied. Coercive control is not always loud. It is not always visible. But it is always dangerous. If someone in your life is controlling you, monitoring you, isolating you, making you afraid of what leaving looks like, there is help. And help, unlike time, is not something that runs out.